This goes. Hi, and welcome to the Catholic Mama podcast. I'm your host, Christine Flynn. Thanks for joining me today on this episode, where I'm also joined by Michael DiStefano, who is the co-founder of this really, I guess, Catholic valued email provider called Fide Email. He is a Catholic convert. And we're going to talk more about keeping families safe online, as well as I'm sure get into a little bit of your own Catholic background. Michael, thanks for joining me.
Yes, nice to speak with you, Christine.
All right, so that was a very brief introduction. If you wouldn't mind telling the listeners a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. I guess they're more interested in my technology background. So I was interested in technology from a young age. I got a hand-me-down computer that I fiddled with when I was in middle school, and I kept installing versions of Linux, which is an open source operating system, on it. And I kept doing this until I ended up breaking the CD drive. And so I was not to be thwarted. So I ended up figuring out how to use a floppy drive and install a bootloader from the floppy drive and do a network install and do all this complicated stuff. So this kind of kick-started a long love for technology on my part. Fast forward a bit, I ended up going to school for computer science and graduating with a computer science degree. I started my first technology company while still in college, and then I've worked for some of the large companies, some of which you've probably heard of, in Silicon Valley, and I've started several of my own, even going so far as to raise venture capital for one. And so I've run the gamut of doing a one-person startup all the way to thousands of people in a company, and I've been working in the tech industry basically ever since then. So that's a little bit of my technology background.
Very cool. And then in the meantime, you haven't always been Catholic.
No,
and actually,
in fact,
I was reading some of your background. It sounds similar to what my husband went through. We're both converts, but he wound up going a philosophical route back to the church. So I don't know if you want to share that for a little bit before we get into our topic today.
Sure, yes. So I was received into the church 3 years ago on Easter Sunday. I converted 4 years ago because there was that RCIA period in between. And essentially, I would have called myself an atheist. I was the sort of Richard Dawkins, young, angry man, sort of atheist, like very, very proud and arrogant and confident that he knew the way the world worked. In fact, I went to a Catholic high school, not for the religion, but because I liked sports, and they had the best sports program. So I went there for that. And for our theology class, I literally, instead of bringing the Bible to class, I used to bring Darwin's Origin of Species, just to be that guy.
Yeah.
So I was very annoying and arrogant and everything like that. And I was living in San Francisco, which is kind of where you end up in the tech industry if you're working in the tech industry. And I had gotten into, like a lot of people in that milieu, I'd gotten into New Age and Buddhism and Hinduism and all that sort of stuff, basically like 1960s Beatles, right? Yeah. So I was doing the transcendental meditation and everything like that. And I had this big failure in one of my companies, and I decided, okay, well, I'll lean on my meditation practice. And so the mantra that I had wasn't working. So I was like, I need a new mantra. So I had this book, and in the book there was a mantra, and I was like, okay, this is going to be the silver bullet. This is going to fix everything if I, this mantra. So anyways, I'll never forget what the mantra was. It was, Heavenly Father, I will reason, I will will, and I will act, but guide thou my reason, will, and activity to the right thing that I should do. And I remember thinking at the time, I was like, this sounds Christian. And of course, being this arrogant person, I was on guard, and I would look everywhere except for, where I'd eventually find the truth. But I remember thinking, this is eerily Christian, but I closed the book. I said, okay, no, this is a yogi on the cover. Okay, I'll do it. So I do it, and I just keep repeating this over and over again until I realized, and by this time I'd gotten pretty adept at like getting into different mental states through meditation and everything. But I realized this is different, and I'm not meditating, but I'm praying, and that I'm conversing with somebody. And then I got really fascinated by, well, who is that someone I'm talking to? And as chance would have it, I had a book by Dr. Edward Fazer on my bookshelf called 5 Proofs of the Existence of God. And I was always interested in philosophy and science and things like that. And so I like to say that my conversion was a sort of dovetailing of the intellectual philosophical side, reading Phaser, talking about Aquinas and others, and this sort of meditation turned to prayer. And then the final thing is I realized later on, the apartment I was living in, one block away, there was the Sisters of Perpetual Adoration convent. And I like to think that grace was just emanating out of there while I was in my apartment, quote unquote, meditating.
Yeah.
And so I ended up looking up a Catholic church on Google Maps, and saw one that had a beautiful English Gothic architecture called St. Dominic's in San Francisco. So I walked in there, and I didn't know what day it was, but it turns out it was Good Friday, the day I went.
Oh, wow.
So that's the story.
Wow, no kidding. That's amazing. Actually, that Phaser book is I think we're on our second or third copy because it's been so used and torn up at this point.
Right.
That's a good one. I'm not naturally very good at philosophy. My husband is a whiz at it, and that one I've been able to handle pretty well. Phaser's good at explaining things for a person like me who isn't naturally adept at that line of thinking. Theology, yep, good. I can do that. Philosophy, maybe not so much. That's a really interesting. that's such a fascinating story. And you did a good job. I always get accused of rolling my eyes every time I talk about my own background because it was New Age, and it's so woo woo. And some of the stuff I believed was so silly. My husband's like, you don't have to roll your eyes every time you talk about it. But I don't know. It just seems kind of ridiculous now. The things that I would have ascribed to back then.
It's embarrassing in a way, right? Like, man, I really looked for answers there. But I like to think that, God is chuckling the whole time because he knows what's going to happen. And he's just like, really? That's a very circuitous route, Michael.
Yeah. I personally said there's no way in hell I'll ever be a Catholic. And I'm sure the Holy Spirit was chuckling over that one.
Yeah.
Because here I am, the Catholic mama. All right. So, we got the technology, we got the faith. I know that you're a software engineer. You've developed this great email that is values based. I really appreciate that. And actually, I do want to ask a couple of questions as we get further along about some other value based software that we can use as Catholics, or maybe feel better about using as Catholics. But there's so much. I don't know, the stats are, you're like 3 clicks away from something super inappropriate on YouTube, or, TikTok. And I just kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies even saying that word, company name out loud. But, when it comes to safety online, this is, I don't know. I grew up, there was a time when the internet wasn't really a thing. And then there was like AOL Instant Messenger. And now everybody, we're just inundated with the internet. And it is part of us. So, I get safety to a degree. I'm not like my parents' generation who believed everything that was printed on the internet. But now, it's a different world now, even from when I first became comfortable with the online space. So yeah, I guess let's get into the topic of our conversation today. The main topic of keeping families safe online. I mean, what is safety for families online? I think maybe just that baseline.
Yeah, I mean, let's use an analogy here, right? So if you're trying to keep your kids safe, and you're sending them in a car, you could buy an armored car and still send them through the really bad neighborhoods or something, or you could just avoid those neighborhoods, right? And it's not to say by avoiding those neighborhoods you're still not going to go on roads, right? But you're just going to avoid let's say the near occasions of sin, right? The dangerous places. And so that's kind of a high level analogy of how I like to approach this. So much of the technology world, and I'm not the first to say this, many people have said this before, but so much is oriented towards clicks and what's called eyeballs, right? Getting your eyeballs to look at content, and engagement is a frequently used term. And I know this because I've worked for some of these companies. Thankfully, I never worked for any of these really ad-driven companies, but I'm very familiar with a lot of my friends have, and just the inner workings of them. And there's this well-known phrase that, if you don't pay for it, you are the product,
Mm.
And that's really important to understand. And I like asking the question, cui bono, who benefits, right? Like follow the money. So who are the real customers of a lot of these companies? It's advertising agencies. And so, okay, just back up and use some logic and say, okay, well, if they're trying to sell ads, right, they want us to be more engaged with the material. And so there's going to be more and more addictive material online to get us embedded in to look at it more frequently, but not only that, to get us into a mental state that's receptive. So I remember looking at this study that came out a while ago, and it was talking about the receptivity of our brains when we're scrolling through Facebook, and why Facebook has a much more effective advertising click-through rate than something like Google search. When you're searching for something on Google, you're generally looking for something, and ads are a nuisance, right? But Facebook, you're in this passive mode. It's like watching television. You're scrolling, and you're much more receptive at that point to distraction. And so a lot of what's made now, are based on these studies. They're trying to create content that's like that, that's distracting, that's puts you in a receptive mind, that dulls your senses in a way. And so, this isn't even to mention any of the sort of really bad stuff online. This is just the sort of par for the course things, right? And so that's kind of it. And I mean, we have laws against advertising cigarettes, it's to children and stuff like that, and how advertising, but online, children are drawn into these things, and they're effectively advertising channels. Think of Facebook. Facebook is an advertising company. They're not a technology company.
Right.
They're an advertising company that uses technology to reach us, right? Same thing with Google and stuff like that. And I know some of them would take offense at me saying that, but in reality, that's their business model, is advertising, right? So their technology is going to be governed by their business model. And because our children are going online and stuff like that, they're going to be vulnerable and exposed to these sorts of manipulative products that are trying to get them solely so that they can see ads and buy things.
Right. Yeah. I'm trying to explain to my kids about advertisements and like what the point of it is. It's not just to share a cool new product with you. It's they want you to spend money. Like, oh, right. You look at it that way. They're not really trying to be helpful to you. They're trying to be helpful to their bottom line. Not to say that all companies are, obviously we own a small business. You have a business. Clearly not everybody's like this evil money grabbing maniacal person, but these big companies, I mean, they need to make their money.
Now, I mean, ads in themselves aren't evil, right? But there's some behaviors that they do because the temptation is so great to optimize. And there's the culture of optimization in the software engineering world, and especially in this domain. And one of the ways they do that is they follow you around. And so whenever you go to a website, for instance, and there's a YouTube video that's embedded, right? That is calling out to YouTube, which Google owns. Mm-hmm. And so as you go to these websites that have Google Analytics, or YouTube embeds, or Facebook logins, or embedded tweets, right? They are able to build a picture of everywhere that you go that has one of these things. Mm-hmm. And now, if you think about all the things that I just mentioned, a huge proportion of the websites that you generally go to have this content on it. And so it's very easy for them to draw a picture of where you're going and what your interests are. Mm-hmm. And so they're drawing this picture of you that's not when you're explicitly going to their website. And this is where it gets into this like consent or lack of consent, right? If you're going to, let's say like NC Register or any Catholic website and they're using Google Analytics, I don't know if they are, I'm just picking on them, but most likely they are, because most people do use Google Analytics, right? You're being tracked by Google, but you're not even going to a Google property and you don't know it.
Right.
So there's things like that. And I think that's where it gets a little creepy.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to work for a multinational retailer and I did the customer insight stuff. So I was always we're always talking in meetings with the social media people and the search engine optimization teams and all this. And it was always about, we talking about it's Big Brother-ish, how much they watch, but try not to be Big Brother. Let's be Big Mother. Let's help people find the products that we think will help them and everything like that. And they were trying to do good work. but still your actions are being monitored and then manipulated.
Right. Now, I think like you said, let's not be big brother, let's be big mother. But I think like part of the answer here is that, you know, the answer to quote unquote big tech isn't big Catholic tech, right? Just like I like to say the answer to, you know, Walmart or something is not Whole Foods, right? It's farmers markets and supporting your local businesses and stuff like that. And so I think reapproaching it from this perspective, and keeping in mind the orientation, right? A lot of these companies are, most of them are not run by Catholics and not run according to Catholic principles, right? And so they're oriented differently. But if we're going to build things oriented towards God, informed by the light of faith, we're going to build them differently, right? So I like to say that, you know, if Catholics are going to build a mega church, it's not going to look like a mega church. It's going to look like a cathedral. Right. It's because it's oriented according to our values, and it's oriented towards the true, the good, and the beautiful, right? And the cathedral in particular, the beautiful.
Right.
And so similarly, if Catholics are going to build these technologies, let's say like YouTube or something, it's not going to look like YouTube. It's going to look like something totally different.
Yeah. Which is where then, you know, you have approached the email space, correct?
Right.
Right. So we're not, you're not, it's not Gmail.
Right.
Right. So let's talk a little about Fide.
Right. So the reason we started with email, and emphasize starting, right? Email was a strategic choice for us to begin with because it has a lot of advantages. So one is it's decentralized to begin with because it's been around for decades. Well, not because, but it happens to be decentralized. What that means is if you have a Gmail account, you can send an email to a Yahoo account or to a Fide account and vice versa. Mm-hmm. There's no dependency that everybody communicating has to be on the same email platform. Now, this is not how things like Facebook Messenger work or WhatsApp or anything like that, right? If you are using WhatsApp, owned by Facebook, by the way, if you're using WhatsApp and you want to communicate with somebody else, they have to be using WhatsApp too. And these are little sort of fiefdoms, right? But email is not like that. It's a decentralized thing to begin with. And so if somebody's starting a competitor to WhatsApp or to Facebook, you know, it has this problem of it's useless unless all your friends are using it. Whereas email is immediately useful. You know, you can sign up for a Fide account and you could still send emails and receive emails from your friends who use Gmail or Yahoo or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the main reasons we started with email. And one of the other reasons, and this is kind of getting back into the original point that I was making, was that email, it starts with a human behavior, which is letter writing, and it applies technology to facilitate that existing good human behavior. Whereas a lot of other technologies, let's say something like Twitter, start with the technology first, and then they modify human behavior to fit the technology. And so we're like, okay, how can we begin doing this? And so, like I said, email has that decentralized thing. It allows us to get a foot in the door, and we want to keep it decentralized because there's efforts to centralize email, right? And there's, it's gaining market dominance, right? So if any one company gets sufficient dominance, they can dictate.
I see, yeah.
Things that are said on it, right? You could imagine how this could happen. Like, you know, we talk about free speech and deplatforming and stuff like that. Well, email can't be done. But imagine if somebody gets large enough market share and they start sending things that they don't like to spam or just not delivering them at all, right? But by having a lot of email providers out there, it prevents that from happening. And email is inherently a resilient technology for that reason. So that, and then also, like I said, you know, capitalizing technology at its best, and this gets to your original question, technology at its best is a tool. To use a Steve Jobs quote, you know, it's funny quoting Steve Jobs in a positive light on a Catholic podcast, but he used to say that the computer is the bicycle of the mind. And what that expresses really well in a pithy way is that technology is a tool. And I think where it goes wrong is where it becomes our master and we forget that it's a tool. And we need to view technology as a tool to accomplish ends that are governed and guided by other things, other principles. The technology can't provide the morality for us, right? We have to provide that. And just like, okay, I have something I want to do. I want to go build a house. And so I'm going to buy a hammer and a saw, right? I want to accomplish XYZ that's in line with my faith and the morality that comes from it. Well, then I need these technological tools. You don't start with the technology. You start with the goal, and then you figure out what the technology is useful to help you achieve that goal.
It sounds like, you know, so many of us consume technology passively, but it sounds like maybe we all need to take a beat and figure out why we're using it, and then make sure that it's aligned. Same as if, you turn on turn on the TV and you're just binge watching something inappropriate on Netflix. Why am I doing this? And should I be doing this, or should I be doing something else?
Right. Not to stretch the analogy too much, but I have a 1-year-old daughter, right? And I'm not going to give her a hammer or a saw because she can't build a house yet, and she can only get hurt.
Yeah.
Right. Similarly, I'm not going to give her an iPhone or an iPad because she can only get hurt, right? Because she doesn't have the self-discipline yet to understand what these things are meant to be used for. And without that goal-oriented utilization of technology, you'll be suckered in, because there's billions of dollars being used to design these tools to capture your attention and to guide it in a way that's useful for them.
Yeah. So, we've been homeschooling for ever. Our kids have never gone to outside of the home for school. And occasionally we'll hear, like, don't you feel like you're just raising them in a bubble? You can't protect them forever. That's true. We can't. However, they're not equipped yet. If we're thinking that we're in a spiritual warfare, our children at this age are not equipped to be soldiers out in the field yet. They're still in training. So you have to kind of keep the parameters around them to keep them safe, knowing full well that they will get their hands on an iPhone at some point or whatever, most likely, and have to navigate the technology on their own, but they need the training first, which is where we keep them kind of separate, or at least for now, or with more guidance than just giving them this here.
And this brings up a topic that I feel like a lot of your listeners won't be happy to hear, but it comes down to the parents, right? I have this book, I have a dog, and I have this book called The Other End of the Leash. And the main premise of the book is like, you're the problem, not the dog, right? If your dog's having a problem, and I think the same thing applies here. We need to model the behavior to our children of how to use technology. We can't be addicted to technology ourselves and then like pretend like they're not going to become addicted too.
Right.
And so, I mean, you can speak to this better than me. I only have one daughter, but I see her eyes. Like if she sees a screen that's on, it just, her eyes just go right to that screen, right? There's something about a screen, a television, whatever form of technology it is, that just captivates you. Yeah. And so my wife is also a software engineer, so we talk about this a lot, but we're very cognizant, and we disallow her to see any screen as much as possible. Yeah. We will turn away from her. We'll go to the other room or something if we need to look at our phone or something like that. And we try to do this as best we can, because we don't want her, a lot of this technology, I think, makes us addicted to, it dulls our senses, because it makes us like the only thing that captures our attention are these like hyper stimulating things, right? And we want to give our daughter the gift of being stimulated by the rustle of the wind and the leaves and stuff like that, not like the cacophony of a modern technology device. And ultimately that's so she can hear the still small voice, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we, when we go to restaurants, if there's TVs in the restaurant, we put our kids with their backs facing it, because we know otherwise it's not going to be a family dinner at this point. It's just going to be us saying, hey, hello, but after years of, even for myself, I've noticed over the years, since whenever I got my first smartphone to, even now, right, I have if I have the phone near me or the screen is on, looking at that rather than, and I realized I was doing this to my mom. And then I was realizing that it's annoying when somebody does it to me, about looking at the screen and answering somebody that's talking to you in person. Right. And it drives me bonkers. It drives me nuts now. But yeah, trying to keep, because the screens, it is so, it's developed and used and manipulated in a way to make us focus so heavily on that. So yeah, I think that's a great point, that as parents, we need to model the behavior that we want our kids to develop at some point whenever they start, because the screens are not going to go away. We can't just toss them in the trash and hope for the best.
Right.
I think that's doing a disservice, right? Because you don't want to be so lenient and loose on all this stuff that your kids aren't growing up with a good moral compass. And then you also don't want to be so restrictive that your kids just go nuts when they get to college or whatever it is, and consuming the things without the guidance.
But we can introduce it in a way, and we can teach them how to use it, just like a carpenter would teach his son how to use a hammer and nails, right? It's not just gonna, hey Johnny, go play with this, right? Like, and you'll figure it out. No, like we have to teach them how to use these tools effectively to affect oriented towards virtuous ends. Right?
Yeah. I've definitely. My son is asked to play music on my phone or something, and or to search it. He's like, oh, I can find it on YouTube. I was like, no, you can't. I'm sorry, you can't. There's weird things on it. I always think back to the old Dave Chappelle skit of him if the internet was a physical place and it's like a mall, and he's like, well, everything's fine, and then he walks into the dark part or whatever. So I'm just, you gotta learn. Yeah, you gotta learn how to use these tools.
Unfortunately, though, it's not just the dark parts. I mean, like these companies are not run by Catholics, right? And like I can vouch for that, right? But I mean, just think about emoji. This is my recent bugbear. I keep talking about emoji because the emoji reinforce the cultural values of the companies that produce it, right? And so why are there no rosary beads? Why is there no priest, right? Why is there a magician and some like weird orb, but there's no priest, there's no monk, there's no religious system, right? And this is the type of thing.
You have pregnant men on there now.
Do you? Oh man, I mean, there's like there's an emoji. They're all typed by a specific string, and there's one called family, which is still the regular, family. How old-fashioned. Man, woman, child, husband, wife, child, right? But and now there's like man, child, right? It's so weird. But the thing is, if Catholics are gonna, we can't. And this is another point I want to make, is technology is going to happen. It's going to be developed no matter if we like it or not. We can stick our heads in the sand, but our children are going to grow up in a world dominated even more so by technology than the world we live in. And we can't just seed the development of this technology to companies and organizations that hate us and hate our values, right? We need to have a seat at the table. We need to be developing this technology ourselves so that our children grow up in a world where there is a priest emoji, right? Where there is, I mean, imagine like one of the hearts. How many hearts emojis are? Imagine there's the sacred heart, right?
I like that. That would be great. Yeah. Right? That's awesome. So, okay. And now there's been a number of years where all this is being developed. It's not being developed by people that share our values. And so, we've gotten into patterns. I would love to get rid of Amazon, and I'm slowly starting to, but it's inconvenient for me to do so. And so now I need to get to the point where I'm comfortable sacrificing convenience on a regular basis so that I can have things that align with my values and feel genuinely good about it without also making my life miserable or exorbitantly expensive because I'm shopping one way and not another. When it comes to technology, we can start with email. That seems like this is a very, a good open door to start with. When it comes to other things, what could we do?
So you make a good point. So it's not exorbitantly expensive, or you don't have to go exceedingly out of your way, right? And I think there's a really nice parallel between the organic, eco-friendly movement and what we're talking about here, right? So in the beginning, seventh generation makes these like cleaning products and stuff, right? And in the beginning, you can only find them at the hippie stores, right? But now it's everywhere. And the price has come down. And the same thing with organic, right? It used to be very expensive and exclusive to be able to buy organic, and the price has come down significantly. And how's that happen? And it's become more available. How's that happen? It's people, voting with their dollars, right? And really saying to the market, this is what we want, right? And so email is how we're doing it first. We have other products in the pipeline. But eventually we want it to be that you have a choice as a Catholic and as a Christian to shop at a business and to not have to worry about what they're funding or where they're giving their money or where they're, putting their influence or something like that, or what types of emojis they're putting on their platforms, right? So email is one way to start, but it's instructive to be able to begin and throw everything out and say, like, let's start from scratch. Where do we really need this? Do we need Netflix? No, we do not need Netflix. It didn't exist 20 years ago, right? We absolutely do not need Netflix. But, my parish gives us access to Formed, right? It's a Catholic video platform. And I just watched one, St. Paul, right? There's some good stuff on there. And it's going to get better and better the more we use it. And maybe the early adopters, we have to suffer a little bit. We have to go drive to the farm instead of go to the convenient grocery store down the road to get organic. But eventually, if more and more people do this, it's going to become more available. And you're going to tell a generation of Catholics who are coming up that, hey, I can start a business according to these values. I don't have to go work for one of these giant companies. And so it's kind of this chicken or egg problem, right? But we need to start by patronizing those sorts of businesses. If there was a Christian baker and a pagan, a cultist baker right next door, right? Like, who would you go to?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing, right? Like we need to start applying some of these lessons from the real world into the tech world.
Okay. Yeah. That makes actually, there's a bakery. I'm laughing because my husband and I were just discussing this. There's a bakery and then there's a chocolate shop, and then they have some overlap and they're right next door to each other. And in the month of June, it becomes very apparent which one we would rather give money to. And that's actually
the month
June.
Of the Sacred Heart, right?
Yeah, the month of the Sacred Heart. June is a great month actually to figure out which companies you want to not give money to.
It is.
And it's everything from Pop-Tarts to it's everything. It's ridiculous. But having companies are becoming more explicit too on what they're supporting. Either it's banners on the top of their website saying they support such and such. See how. I'm thinking of Canva right now, has that on there, a banner about supporting whatever the cause du jour is. So it becomes easier to pinpoint, but then it's finding the alternatives, which, as you say, it may be slightly inconvenient now, but maybe not, and not forever. Short term maybe, but in the long term, if we stick with it and then also talk about it to other people and spread these other possibilities.
And that's part of our mission. We want to show that this is possible, and we want to kind of pave the way that other people can do it with other services and identify other gaps that need to be filled. But you're right, June is a great month to figure out which alternatives need to exist.
That's right. Just cross them off the list. Oh yeah, well, it's almost July as we're recording this, so we got a little bit longer till next year to see what other companies jump on the bandwagon. All right, so now about email and about Fide, let's talk about that specifically a little bit before we finish up our time here.
Sure. Yeah, it works just like Gmail, or any email. I mean, email is email, right? It's a fungible thing, right? It's really nice that way because it's decentralized. And so if you sign up for a Fide.email account, the nice thing is you don't have to get, like Gmail, you've got billions of users, right? So you have to have like a zillion numbers after your name because all the good ones are taken. So our emails end, instead of @gmail.com or @yahoo.com, it ends in @fide.email. So I am Michael@fide.email if any of your listeners want to email me. And they could have their very own one too. So if you just go to fide.email, it's not .com, it's .email, or just search for it. And you could sign up for an email account. Now, we are about to launch. We actually have quite a few Catholic businesses and organizations and religious, as you might imagine, using it. But we haven't really publicized that yet. So next week, we're actually launching an official page, Fide for Organizations, which is going to make it much more streamlined and easier for Catholic organizations and businesses to use their own domain and stuff like that.
Sure.
And we're going to be, we're going to be offering other things like file sharing, like a Google Drive competitor, things like that, in addition to email. And that's all next week. We're going to be launching that. But if you're interested before then, send me an email and we can get you set up. But that's really it. Our customers are individuals. We have a family plan, which is steeply discounted to accommodate large Catholic families, and we have an individual plan. All those end at fide.email, but you can use your own domain, and we have quite a few, and we're definitely growing the business, parish, and nonprofit Catholic organizations using it as well.
Right, and it's not this information isn't being gathered and and used by Microsoft or Google or anything in some creepy way. So there's many reasons.
No, I mean, that's why we charge for it. We
Yeah.
don't sell ads. We don't make money from advertising. We make money the old fashioned way. We give you a good or a service, and you give us a little bit of money, and you get the good in exchange for the money, right?
Simple.
Yep.
So simple. Okay, very cool. So yeah, I was looking at the email. Now, is it can you forward, like, say, Gmail emails to?
Yes.
You can. Okay. I mean, like, not to, like, forward to, I'm like, if I'm just trying to, like, again, the convenience, or setting up on new platforms. Do I have to just let everybody know physically, like, I got a new email address, or can you auto forward things?
You can do it either way you want. We have a lot of customers who realize that their old email inbox is cluttered with spam and junk, and they want to start clean and not forward, and so we have a lot of people who do that and just try to be a little bit more judicious about who they give this new address out to. And we have other people who do forward, right? And it's really up to you. And the forwarding, I mean, you can forward 20 different email addresses into your feed. Like, it doesn't matter, right? You can do whatever you want there. That's entirely up to you.
Okay. Now I'm just thinking ahead. Yeah, my Gmail is a mess, and I hate that they have the different the primary and social and promotions. We own our own business, and oftentimes the emails that we send out don't seem like promotions to me, but I know they wind up in the promotions tab in Gmail. And
right.
Gosh, we get so many issues just with deliverability, the Hotmail or Yahoo or whatever it is. There's always some issue.
Right. They have some incentive. They have some incentive to deprioritize certain things, as I said. So ours just works, just clean email, and we have a web interface, but you can use, like, my wife uses it on her iPhone with the Apple Mail app. I like Spark Mail a lot, but there's a lot of apps out there, and most of them are compatible just because it's a regular email. So you use any app or multiple apps, or our web interface, or any combination thereof.
That's great. Yeah. Like I said, I'm so overwhelmed by Gmail. I know you and I had a problem connecting because we had been emailing, and then Microsoft decided to start putting you in spam, and I'm very sorry for that, but it doesn't make any sense. Why? But yeah, so emails become so cluttered. Maybe just starting fresh would be the best idea. That sounds nice, starting fresh. All right, so it's FIDEI.email.
Yes. Okay. And that's right. Fide means faith, right? So
yeah, awesome. Well, Michael, thanks for sharing some ideas with me today and the listeners about just technology, like the big view, and also keeping families safe. Parents model good behavior. That's just, actually, I was thinking about this. I've been reading the Bible cover to cover, and I did it once before. I'm on my second time doing it, and I flip around. I do a little bit of the Old Testament, some Psalms, and then go to the New Testament. And I keep seeing in, like, Kings and Chronicles, it's like, the one king did a great job following in the ways of the Lord. His son came along, did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, another evil, and then a good one. And then, like, where's the parenting in this? How is it that the father was like an awesome God-fearing king, and then the child just did what was evil on the side of the Lord? So we don't want that happening with our technology usage.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, cool. Hey, Michael, thanks again. And for listeners, I will put links in the show notes that you can easily just click and find what we've been talking about today. And all right. Yeah. Until next time.
Thank you, Christine. Nice speaking with you.
All right, everyone. Take care.